Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Cut Rate Commander, the series in which we take a look at low-price commanders and make budget decks with them. My name is Grazzet, and today we'll be looking at the Draconic Guardian of Candlekeep, Miirym Sentinel Wyrm. Before we continue, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you like this content and would like me to continue making more videos like this in the future. And if you're feeling particularly generous, consider buying me a coffee at the link in the description to keep me caffeinated as I work on more of these builds. Also, don't forget to check out the channel's 5K subscriber giveaway, link in the description, so you can enter for a chance to win a completed Dina Soul Steeper deck and some nice unlockable upgrades before the deadline on July 31st. Also, be sure to stick around until the end of the video to see who won last week's poll and what commanders you'll be voting for an upcoming episode. So, with that out of the way, let's start by taking a look at the commander and playstyle. Miirym Sentinel Wyrm is a 6/6 dragon spirit that costs 3, a green, a blue, and a red with flying, ward 2, and the following ability. Whenever another non-token dragon enters the battlefield under our control, create a token that's a copy of it, except the token isn't legendary if that dragon is legendary. Breaking down her core stats, Miirym is sporting a hefty CMC, an impressive stat block to match alongside a decent pair of keywords to grant her evasion and a measure of protection, and a powerful ability that lets us double up on our dragons as they enter play, including legendary ones. Looking more in depth into this ability, we can see that it more or less turns our commander into a better dragon-specific Reflections of Letjara from the command zone, netting us 2-for-1 value for every dragon spell we cast, play, or have enter the battlefield. And while this is certainly a potent ability on its own, as our colors have plenty of powerful dragons that can take full advantage of it, it gets even better by ignoring the legendary rule to enable us to produce additional copies of legendary dragons as well, including our commander herself if we're able to clone her. So, as we can see, Miirym is clearly a dragon tribal commander, aiming to flood the board with token copies of the dragons we summon. So it should come as no surprise that this build will be a dragon-focused one with a splash of clone and flicker effects to get even more copies of dragons into play and overwhelm our opponents with our massive dragon flight. On the Draconic front, we'll be running plenty of powerful legendary and non-legendary dragons that benefit from being cloned, by either generating us card advantage, serving as additional removal, or just by being huge evasive beatsticks to pile on the damage into our opponent's life totals. And alongside them, we'll be running a good number of clones to get even more copies of our dragons into play, or even additional copies of our commander, which will cause us to lose the clone but will still create a non-legendary copy of our commander to create even more copies from, as well as running a number of flicker effects to help our commander dodge removal in addition to creating additional copies of our dragons as they re-enter play. So, let's see if our opponents have what it takes to survive the onslaught this spectral dragon and her dragonflight will be unleashing upon them. No longer contained in the Candlekeep's catacombs and fueled by the powerful magics that bind her to unlife, this half-mad ghost dragon won't hesitate to tear apart any she views as intruders in her domain, granting those who oppose us the warm embrace of oblivion which has been denied to her for centuries. So, now that we know a bit more about the commander and playstyle, let's start looking at the deck itself by starting with the creatures. Skipping straight to the CMC2 slot, we have our first dragon entrant with Corlessa Scalesinger, a 1/4 that lets us look at the top card of our deck at any time and cast dragon spells from it, serving as a cheap and repeatable source of card advantage that takes full advantage of our deck's high dragon count. Then we close out this slot with Dragonlord's Servant, a 1/3 that reduces the cost of dragon spells we cast by 1, providing us with an early drop that gives us a much appreciated discount to help get us to our commander and other high-cost dragons that much faster. Following the same trend, the CMC3 slot brings us its sole entrant with Dragon Speaker Shaman, a 2/2 that reduces the cost of all our dragon spells by 2, giving us another mana discount to help further take the edge off our commander and other main deck dragons' usually high mana costs. Moving on to the CMC4 slot, we have a wave of evasive dragons starting us off with Opportunistic Dragon, Thunderbreak Regent, and Vengeful Ancestor. Opportunistic Dragon is a 4/3 flyer that, when it ETBs, has us gain control of target human or artifact an opponent controls, also causing it to lose all its abilities and preventing it from attacking or blocking until Opportunistic Dragon leaves play, making it a decent-sized evasive dragon for the cost that will have plenty of rocks, utility artifacts, and the occasional human to steal away from our opponents as we cast and clone it. Thunderbreak Regent is a 4/4 flyer that, whenever a dragon we control is targeted by an opponent's spell or ability, deals 3 damage to them. Its AoE ward-like effect making it a decent way to disincentivize our opponents from targeting our dragons, that only gets better as we get more copies of it into play. Vengeful Ancestor is a 3/4 flyer that, when it ETBs or attacks, goads target creature and, whenever a goaded creature attacks, has it deal 1 damage to its controller, giving us a respectable and repeatable source of creature disruption with its goad and even tacking on some additional burn to boot, which again all get better as we get more copies of it. Then we have a pair of non-evasive dragons joining our ranks with Draconic Muralists and Renari Merchant of Marvels. Draconic Muralists are a 4/3 that, when they die, let us search our deck for a dragon card, reveal it, and put it into our hand, making them a relatively easy to enable tutor that greatly helps out the deck's consistency and which we can get multiple copies of with our commander and clone effects. Renari is a 2/4 that lets us play dragon and artifact spells at flash speed, not really benefiting from our commander's ability, but enabling us to play our dragons on our opponent's turns to help evade removal and give them pseudo haste, which are great options to have. Then moving away from dragons and onto clones as we move deeper into this slot, we have Altered Ego, Undercover Operative, Dax's Duplicate, and Clone, all of which are 0/0s which can ETB as a copy of any creature on the battlefield. The first being an X creature that comes into play with X+1/+1 counters and is uncounterable, the second coming into play with a shield counter, the third giving the copied creature haste and dethrone, and the last having no additional abilities, all working very nicely with our commander to get extra copies of her or our other dragons into play while providing the majority of those copies with decent upside. Vizier of Many Faces and Mirror Hall Mimic then join us as clones with some graveyard usage, again both being 0/0s that can ETB as a copy of any creature in play, the former also having Entomb for 3 and double blue to get a token copy of it from our bin to copy something else, and the latter having Disturb for 3 and double blue instead, transforming itself into Ghastly Mimicry, an aura that creates a token copy of the enchanted creature on our upkeep that's also a spirit, giving us access to even more clones and the option to use them an additional time after they've been dealt with. And finally, our last clone and creature in this slot is Clever Impersonator, yet another 0/0 that this time can ETB as a copy of any non-land permanent in play, making it our most flexible clone by far that can copy anything we or our opponents control depending on what the situation calls for. Proceeding to the CMC 5 slot, we jump back on the Dragon game plan with a trio of legendary entrants, those being Ganix Astral Hunter, Emerith Desert Doom, and Lausanne Dragon's Legacy. Ganix is a 3/4 flyer that, whenever he or another dragon ETBs under our control, creates a treasure token. His below average stat block being more than made up for by the insane amount of ramp he can provide us with as we create copies of both him and our other dragons. Emerith is a 5/5 flyer that has Ward 4 whenever she's untapped, and when she deals combat damage to a player, either draws us a card, or, if we have less than 3 cards in hand, draws us cards equal to the difference instead, making her a decent sized and surprisingly resilient evasive threat that can help us reload our hands very quickly, especially if we're running low on cards already. Lausanne is a 4/2 flyer that, whenever we cast a dragon or adventure spell, has a steal damage equal to its CMC to any non-commander target, weaponizing our dragon's naturally high CMC by turning them into removal and burn, which can get completely out of hand if we're able to get multiple copies of him in play. Then we have another pair of legendary dragons joining our ranks with Thrakus the Butcher and Furkrag Cunning Instigator. Thrakus is a 3/4 trampler that, whenever he attacks, doubles the power of each dragon we control until the end of the turn, making him a powerful dragon payoff that takes advantage of our commander's ability to flood the board with dragons, exponentially growing their power the more copies of him we get into play. Furkrag is a 3/3 hasty flyer that, whenever one or more dragons we control attack an opponent, goads target creature they control, and, whenever a creature that's forced to attack deals combat damage to a player, Furkrag gains a +1/+1 counter and draws us a card, serving as a repeatable source of creature disruption that gets bigger and provides card advantage as it forces our opponents to swing into each other. Some non-legendary dragons then close out our draconic entrance in this slot with Glorybringer, Scourge of Valkus, and Wrathful Red Dragon. Glorybringer is a 4/4 hasty flyer we can exert to have it deal 4 damage to target non-dragon creature an opponent controls, making it a fast evasive body that synergizes with our commander and we can use as spot removal if needed. Scourge of Valkus is another 4/4 flyer that, whenever it or another dragon ETBs under our control, deals X damage to any target, where X is the number of dragons we control, turning our ability to flood the board with dragons into removal and eventually a win con if we can get multiple copies of it to stick. Wrathful Red Dragon is a 5/5 flyer that, whenever a dragon is dealt damage, has it deal that much damage to target non-dragon target, its damage reflection making it quite difficult for our opponents to block our dragons or remove them with damage unless they're willing to take a significant amount of damage themselves. And finally, closing out this slot, we have the clone Mercurial Pretender, which can ETB as a copy of any creature in play and lets us pay 2 and double blue to return it back to our hand, giving us yet another clone that this time we can protect at instant speed by sending it back to our hand, or alternatively bounce it to copy a better target and get an additional copy of it via our commander. Now entering the CMC 6 slot, we have another trio of legendary dragons starting us off with Intet the Dreamer, Niv Mizzet Draco Genius, and Kaiga the Tide Star. Intet is a 6/6 flyer that, whenever she deals combat damage to a player, lets us pay 2 and a blue to exile a top card of our deck face down, letting us look at it and play it for free so long as Intet is in play, making her a large evasive beatstick that provides us with card advantage off the top of our deck so long as we have the mana to enable it. Niv-Mizzet is a 5/5 flyer that, whenever he deals combat damage to a player, draws us a card, as well as letting us pay a blue and a red to have him deal 1 damage to any target, making him a repeatable source of card advantage as we swing in with him or use his ability to burn our opponents. Kaiga is another 5/5 flyer that, when they die, has us gain control of target creature. Their on-death theft effect making it quite difficult for our opponents to get rid of the original or any token copies we create without them losing their own creatures to us in the process to replace it. Lathis Dragon Queen then wraps up our legendary dragons in this slot, being a 6/6 flyer that, whenever a non-token dragon ETBs under our control, creates a 5/5 flying dragon token in addition to letting us pay 1 and a red to give all dragon creatures we control +1/+0 until end of turn, making her another big evasive beatstick that helps flood our board with even more dragon tokens alongside our commander, and then pumping all our dragons with her powerful AoE fire breathing to enable devastating alpha strikes to close out games. 2 non-legendary dragons then wrap up this slot with Savage Ventmaw and Steel Hellkite. Savage Ventmaw is a 4/4 flyer that, whenever it attacks, generates 3 red and 3 green mana that isn't lost until the end of the turn, on its own producing a substantial amount of ramp to help us cast our other dragons with, but when copied or cloned, generating us truly massive amounts of mana for us to use. Steel Hellkite is a 5/5 flyer that we can pay 2 to give +1/+0 until end of turn and, once per turn, lets us pay X to destroy each non-land permanent of CMC X whose controller was dealt damage by it this turn. Its ability to repeatedly remove pesky permanents without targeting and leveling boards of tokens for free, making it invaluable in keeping the board clear of threats. Reaching the CMC 7 slot, the first half brings us yet another pair of legendary entrants with Atarka World Render and Dracoseth Maw of Flames. Atarka is a 6/4 flying trampler that, whenever a dragon we control attacks, gives it double strike until the end of the turn, effectively doubling our board's damage output as we swing in to help close out games even faster. Dracoseth is a 7/7 flyer that, whenever he attacks, deals 4 damage to any target and 3 damage to up to 2 other targets, making him an enormous evasive beatstick that will easily remove chump blockers from his path or pump extra damage into our opponent's life totals with every swing, especially with multiples of him flying around. The latter half of this slot then brings us the non-legendary but still impressive dragons Thunder Dragon and Tyrant's Familiar. Thunder Dragon is a 5/5 flyer that, when it ETBs, deals 3 damage to each creature without flying, dealing an impressive board-wide 6 damage when it ETBs alongside our commander that leaves all our other evasive dragons untouched, which we can then clone even further to keep the board clear of creatures. Tyrant's Familiar is another 5/5 flyer, this time with haste, that, if we control our commander, gains +2/+2 and deals 7 damage to target creature the defending player controls whenever it attacks. Its massive size, repeatable removal, and ability to swing in as soon as it comes down, making it a prime candidate to be doubled up on to keep the pressure up on the board. Nearing the end now, the CMC 8 slot brings us its singular entrance with Astral Dragon, a 4/4 that, when it ETBs, creates 2 token copies of target non-creature permanent that are also 3/3 flying dragons, putting down an impressive 10/10 worth of evasive stats as soon as it comes down and enabling us to get 2 free copies of the most powerful non-creature on the table, which can range anywhere from good to backbreaking depending on the board state. And finally, skipping all the way to the CMC 15 slot, we have our last creature entry with Earthquake Dragon, a 10/10 flying trampler who costs X less to cast, where X is equal to the total CMC of all dragons we control, as well as letting us pay 2 a green and sacking a land to return it from our grave back to hand, usually costing us 5 or less with just our commander and 1 other dragon in play for its massive evasive stat block, which, alongside its recurability, makes it a very powerful and hard to deal with threat. That covers all our creatures, so let's move on to our instance. Our first entrant in the CMC 1 slot is Stubborn Denial, which counters target spell unless its controller pays 1, or if we control a 4+ power creature, just counters it, making it a dirt cheap way to protect our commander and board from destruction that takes full advantage of our creature's naturally high power. Then our second and last entrant in this slot is Essence Flux, which exiles target creature, then returns it back into play under its owner's control, giving it a +1/+1 counter if it's a spirit, again serving as a means to protect our commander from removal and growing her slightly while doing so, as well as a way to cheaply flicker another dragon to create an extra token copy of it, Proceeding to the CMC2 slot, we have another pair of counter spells joining our ranks with Counterspell and Silumgar's Scorn, both of which counter target spell, the former doing so unconditionally and the latter doing so unless its controller pays 1, or if we control or reveal a dragon, just counters it instead, adding even more cheap ways to protect our commander and board from removal and wipes. Planar Incision then closes out this slot, which exiles target creature, then returns it back into play under its owner's control with a +1/+1 counter on it, again adding in more flicker to protect Miirym and or proc her token creation. The CMC3 slot then brings us some removal options with Beast Within and Chaos Warp, both of which deal with target permanent, the former by destroying it and giving its owner a 3/3 to replace it, and the latter by shuffling it back into its owner's deck, then having the owner reveal a top card from it, allowing them to put it into play if it's a permanent. Their unparalleled ability to deal with nearly any type of threat, making them well worth running despite their downsides. Then we have even more flicker effects joining our arsenal as we move deeper into this slot with Blur, Displace, and Ghostly Flicker. The first exiling target creature, then returning it back into play under its owner's control while drawing us a card, while the latter to exile and return 2 targets instead, the former being limited to creatures and the latter to creatures, artifacts, and or lands. Again, adding even more ways to keep our commander safe and proc her token creation, and sometimes even both. Bloth's Will then closes out this slot, an X spell that has us choose one of the following effects, or instead both if we control our commander. Deal X damage to each creature without flying and or destroy up to X target artifacts and or enchantments, making it a scalable way to destroy our opponent's front or back row while leaving ours untouched, and often both with our commander in play. And finally, skipping to the CMC5 slot, we have our last instant with Return of the Wild Speaker, which has us choose one of the following effects. Draw cards equal to the greatest power among non-humans we control, or give all non-human creatures we control +3/+3 until end of turn, serving as either an excellent source of card advantage that makes use of our dragon's naturally high stat blocks, or a means to alpha strike our opponents with our large evasive board presence, either of which are great for us. That covers all our instants, so let's move on to our sorceries. It's going to be mainly ramp in this category, with the CMC2 slot bringing us Rampant Growth, Farseek, and Nature's Lore, all 3 of which search our deck for a land and put it into play, the first being limited to basics and putting it into play tapped, the second being limited to non-forests with a basic land type and also putting it into play tapped, and the last being limited to forests and putting it into play untapped, each providing our build with cheap and efficient means to speed up our mana base and get our commander and other high CMC dragons out that much faster. This trend then continues into the CMC3 slot with its 2 entrants, Cultivate and Kodama's Reach, both of which search our deck for 2 basic lands, putting one into play tapped and the other into our hand, providing our build with even more land-based ramp to help speed up and fix our mana base. Then, skipping to the CMC6 slot and onto our last sorcery, we depart from ramp and onto draw with Rishkar's Expertise, which draws us cards equal to the greatest power among creatures we control and then lets us cast a CMC5 or less spell from our hand for free, easily reloading our hands thanks to our creature's high stat blocks and even getting a free spell out of it as a bonus. That covers all our sorceries, so let's move on to our enchantments. It's all draw in this category, with all 3 entrants being in the CMC3 slot, those being Elemental Bond, Garruk's Uprising, and Temur Ascendancy. The first drawing us a card whenever a 3+ power creature ETBs under our control, and the latter 2 drawing us a card whenever a 4+ power creature ETBs under our control instead. The former also drawing us a card if we control a 4+ power creature when it ETBs and granting all our creatures trample, while the latter grants all our creatures haste instead, each providing us with a steady supply of card draw as we play and clone our dragons while occasionally providing our entire board with decent keywords as well. That covers all our enchantments, so let's move on to our artifacts. Sol Ring and Wayfarer's Bauble start us off in the CMC1 slot, the former tapping for 2, and the latter letting us pay 2, tap it and sack it to put a basic land from our deck into play tapped, both serving as cheap and efficient means to speed up our mana base even further. The CMC2 slot then brings us even more ramp with its sole entrant, Arcane Signet, which we can tap for any color in our commander's color identity, again providing us with more cheap ramp and fixing to help us more reliably get to our commander. Then, reaching the CMC3 slot, we close out this category with 3 dragon-focused mana rocks, those being Dragon's Hoard, Carnelian Orb of Dragonkind, and Jade Orb of Dragonkind. Dragon's Hoard taps for any color and gains a gold counter whenever a dragon ETBs under our control, letting us tap it and remove a counter to draw a card, making it a decent mana rock that also serves as a repeatable tribal source of card advantage as well. Carnelian Orb of Dragonkind and Jade Orb of Dragonkind tap for a red and green respectively, and if that mana is used to cast a dragon creature spell, give that dragon a bonus. The former granting it haste until the end of the turn, and the latter giving it a +1/+1 counter and hexproof until the start of our next turn instead. Again, giving us serviceable rocks that empower our dragons further with extra speed and resilience. That covers all our artifacts, and with no planeswalkers to cover, let's move straight to our land base. Starting with our mana lands, we have Command Tower, which taps for any color in our commander's color identity, Exotic Orchard, which taps for any color an opponent's land would be able to produce, Shivan Reef and Yavimaya Coast, both of which either tap for a colorless or a blue or red or blue or green instead if we take a damage, Cinderglade, which comes into play tapped unless we control 2 or more basic lands, taps for a red or green and is considered a mountain and a forest. Temple of the Dragon Queen, which comes into play tapped unless we control or reveal a dragon and taps for a color chosen by us when it ETBs. Frontier Bovac, which comes into play tapped and taps for all our colors. Path of Ancestry, which taps for any color in our commander's color identity and lets us scry 1 if we use that mana to cast a creature spell of a matching type to our commander. Myriad Landscape, which comes into play tapped, taps for a colorless and we can pay 2, tap it and sack it to put 2 of the same basic land from our deck into play tapped. And finally, Evolving Wilds and Terramorphic Expanse, both of which we can tap and sack to put a basic land from our deck into play tapped. Then, as our sole utility land, we have Haven of the Spirit Dragon, which either taps for a colorless or any color instead that we can only use to cast dragons or pay for their activated abilities, as well as letting us pay 2, tap it and sack it to return a dragon from our grave back into our hand, providing us with even more fixing for our dragons and some recursion in a pinch if needed. And finally, we're running 8 islands, 8 mountains, and 8 forests as our basics to close out our land base. So, now that we've covered all the cards in the deck, let's take a look at this deck's breakdown. This deck currently has 37 creatures including the commander, 12 instants, 6 sorceries, 3 enchantments, 6 artifacts, 0 planeswalkers, and 36 lands. Looking at the stats that matter to our game plan, we have 27 dragons, 23 cards that care about dragons, 9 clone and copy effects, and 5 flicker effects, leaving us with a solid number of dragons to proc our commander and plenty of payoffs for them as well, in addition to a decent number of clones and flicker effects to give us redundant copies of them and proc our commander even more. For general deck stats, we have 16 ramp sources, 10 card draw sources, 17 targeted removal sources, and 3 board wipes. Our ramp and removal being high in order for us to reach our higher CMC dragons and our commander faster while maintaining control of the board respectively, with our draw and wipes falling within more normal ratios. Looking at our mana curve, we have 4 1-drops, 9 2-drops, 15 3-drops, 12 4-drops, 10 5-drops, 8 6-drops, 4 7-drops, 1 8-drop, and 1 15-drop. Leaving us with a mid to heavyweight curve that aims to ramp hard to get our commander out as quickly as possible, then flooding the board with dragons and dragon tokens alongside them while keeping them alive for as long as possible. Currently, this deck is valued at $64.60, not counting the price of basic lands or shipping. This price was calculated by using the cheapest listed marketplace price on TCG Player at the time of this recording. For side grades, the legendary dragons Ryusei the Falling Star, Kairi the Swirling Sky, and Kura the Boundless Sky would all make excellent additions thanks to their decent stat blocks and powerful on-death effects. Phantasmal Image, Stunt Double, and Glasspool Mimic are all solid clones to add in if we want even more means to copy our dragons, and if we want an infinite combo in the build, we can add in Hellkite Charger, who, alongside 2 copies of Savage Ventmaw, can generate us infinite combat phases to wipe out all our opponents in one fell swoop. For upgrades, Atsushi the Burning Sky is a well-statted dragon for her cost that provides us with decent impulse draw and ramp upon her death. Bloth Unrivaled Ancient provides us with a huge amount of ramp that takes advantage of our wide board states to help us cast even more dragons. Dragonborn Champion turns all our high-statted dragons into continual sources of card advantage as they continue to swing in and connect. Ultvara Hellkite enables us to flood our board with exponentially more and more dragons as we continue to swing in with them turn after turn. And Terror of the Peaks turns every dragon that ETBs under our control into removal or burn with its powerful Warstorm Surge-like effect that only gets better the more copies we make of it. And finally, if we want to make sure our dragon's hordes are nice and full, Old Gnawbone and Ancient Copper Dragon make for powerful additions to flood our board with plenty of treasures to help pay for our other spells as they swing in, but sadly not for their own exorbitant costs. Thanks everyone for sticking around until the end of the video. Firstly, I'd like to thank everyone who's been participating in the channel's 5k giveaway and helping the channel reach its 5.6k milestone. If you haven't done so already, please check out the link in the description to see how to enter to win a copy of the Dina Soulsteeper build featured on the channel, and unlock further upgrades for it by subscribing. Taking a look at the results of last week's poll, it looks like Wilson Refined Grizzly was able to claw his way to the top spot, so look forward to a Voltron build featuring him next week. Moving on to this week's poll, I figured we'd give some of the Planeswalker commanders a chance at the polls, so this week's contenders will feature Ilminster, Misk and Boo Timeless Heroes, and Tasha the Witch Queen. Please cast your vote in the community tab, link in the description, and let me know in the comments who you voted for, and what commanders you want to see from Streets of New Capenna or Battle for Baldur's Gate in future polls. Before we close out, again, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't done so already, as this channel cannot grow without your support. And if you feel like showing your thanks by keeping me caffeinated while I make these videos, please consider buying me a coffee at the link in the description. Speaking of which, I'd like to thank Steve for their generous donation. Thanks for the coffee, Steve, and thanks for supporting the channel. And if any of you would like to support the channel in a different way, feel free to check out the other deck techs floating around my head if you'd like to see the latest builds, or click on the link above for a playlist of all the Cut Rate Commander episodes I've made so far. And with that, have a good one folks, and stay safe.